Alrighty. Hope everybody who is tuning in is doing well. Today I'm going to just be continuing my own way to make sure I'm getting models painted up and stuff by going live with it. And today we've got the Mean Man Shocker, who I think is going to be a really fun one to paint because I love these characters that only have a couple of colors on them, really. And so, really, he is just kind of that burgundy red and that yellow, kind of like golden yellow, ochreish almost color. And so, these guys are kind of like my favorite ones to paint because they're really quick to get done. They're two basic colors, and instead of having like a ton of just random little details, we'll need to go in and do like the shockwave and whatever is going around his fists, and probably a little bit of metallic for his gloves. But otherwise, like Shocker for 90% of his model is just the two colors. As usual, went ahead and cheated a little bit by getting the eyes done because there's still zero chance that you would catch me actually being able to do that, me hunched over my camera and all that. And it will, for some at least, I hopefully bring relief that I have an actual wet palette now, thanks to one of my locals, Corey, who donated this so that I did not have to use my setup on stream. So, With that, eyes are already done, and I'm going to kind of stick to the same general principle that I always have, which is painting up. So painting the stuff that's the lowest first, and then going in and doing base coats on other stuff. So for Shocker, that's going to mean his yellow ochreish color is going to go first. And so I originally was just going to go with like a straight up yellow, but ultimately have decided to go with the Ochre Triumvirate from the Two Thin Coats line, because that's what I've got. So we're going to start with Gizmo Fur, and if we don't like where that kind of kicks things off, we'll take it up a notch, but it's got a nice yellow-brownish mix to it, and as we highlight up, it goes a little bit more yellow, so hopefully ends up with that overall look that I'm hoping for. And if not, we just go do some other things. I will say this is probably going to be one of the few models I haven't used a wash in a little while, unless it's like for a very specific effect. So like a wash plus dry brush on fur or something like that. It's been a little bit, and yeah, I think I'm going to like how this dark yellow is going to do. But I'm absolutely going to be using a wash on Shocker. Shocking, hopefully nobody. Because he's got these recessed lines, and instead of trying to just perfectly highlight every single one of those lines with the next color up, a wash is just going to do really good things. Yeah, I'm going to be happy with that. To just get right down in those recesses with very minimal work. And then I can kind of go back in with this and do almost treat the same base coat as a layer paint to brighten it back up if I'm too messy with the wash. For just some really nice and easy recessed shading. And hopefully you guys can even enjoy that live, since the base coating should be a little bit of a faster and easier process today. I will say Shocker is a little bit more awkward to paint than I originally thought he was going to be, because those arms are just like right in front of everything, and it makes perfect sense for them to be right there for the pose and everything else, but also a little bit of a pain. And here with this base coat, don't need to be super careful because we're not working with any other like super delicate colors on Shocker. Just going to be careful around the eyes. We want a little bit of that black standing out, but I was also intentionally messy with the black around his eyes in the first place. So there's going to be a little bit of cleanup there, but we just don't want to get too crazy with it. See, this is where the arms are like, ah, well, I want to get to that face. But they're just not letting me do that easily. Anybody by chance remember what color his hands are? Are they supposed to be the dark brownish yellow? Ooh, looks like I'll have to cheat. Just a little bit. So we're going to have to go in and clean up just a little bit with the black. Went a little bit too much there. Not world-ending mistake or anything. Yeah, but otherwise I think this darker yellow is going to be a really good starting point for where I want him to end up, because he's not going to be super bright and colorful. His all of his colors have always been kind of muted and on the darker side anyway. Let's see. There totally is some burgundy we're going to have to get there awkwardly later. One thing I will say, even though I'm kind of being a little bit careful here, is don't be afraid to, like in some of these like hard to get corners down here kind of an area, don't be afraid to be intentionally a little bit messy, because then if you're, when you're coming in super careful with the second coat or your second color, and you're doing cleanup, you'll realize, oh, I didn't actually go far enough with that first color, and then there's just like a little bit of awkward gray space that you have to go in and touch up and fix and try to get it just right so that it works out everywhere. So just being a little bit messy, and worst case scenario, you don't hit it with the second color where you were supposed to, but then it doesn't really matter because it just kind of blends itself in. Shocker here has some pretty chunky boots, so a little bit of mess up there is no issue at all. I will say, camera or not, coming in for these chest details later is going to be a pain. Because again, the pose for Shocker makes sense. It's like absolutely his most iconic thing from any game or movie or show or anything like that. So I'd almost be disappointed if it was any pose other than this. However, if you have a easy way to assemble and paint those arms separately, it might be to your benefit. Alright, and I think that's most of his chest area done. We just need to hit this last leg. And kind of another nice thing here with Shocker is this first coat definitely leaves a little bit to be desired and the need of a second coat. Oh, inside of the arms. But because I'm planning on coming back with this initial base color for it to kind of be the first layer again after we are done with the wash, is the second coat kind of is going to get to happen anyway, so unless an area is just really patchy, it is not necessary to go back again. Like some colors like the dark greens and stuff out there will absolutely want and need it, but not so much for this. Alright. So there is first coat of the yellow down. And so I'm probably going to go ahead and get a little bit of the first coat of the reddish brown down and done. For that, I'm going to try color Dread Red. See how it looks, and if it's a bit too much one-way red or one-way brown, just take a base coat of either the brown or the red, whichever way I feel like the color needs to go. And can highlight from there. Just mix in a little bit of red if I want it to read a little bit more red. But probably for this base coat, which is just a nice, almost like brick red, probably don't need to do any adjusting, but for the mid-tone and highlight, might be worthwhile. Alright. Yeah, so this is leading quite a bit more red than I originally thought it was going to. So either I'm in a very good spot, or I'm going to be going back in here in a little while and mixing some brown into the highlight colors or something. Got a little bit more water mixed into this. Paint wasn't flowing off quite as nicely as I had originally wanted it to. And just go in with this nice burgundy red. I will say Shocker has a lot of raised edges for where his suit meets the kind of padded material looking thing that he's got going on. So just take your time, be careful when you're going along these edges. Because even though we're going back over it with the yellow, I'd really rather not have to go back over it with the yellow to make sure I have a consistent tone across the board and then do the wash, only to then highlight back up with the yellow. That just sounds like too much for me. I'm getting real quiet because I'm focusing. What up, Timmy? How you been, man? We still need to play Helldivers. Very soon, preferably. Preferably? I'm sure your level is far beyond mine at this point, though. Alright, so at this point, I think the yellow is dried up more than sufficiently, so we're gonna finish up all this red. Do I dare ask what level you've gotten to at this point? Because, like, I'm sitting strong at, like, 31 right now, and I'm quite happy with it. I haven't played as much as I probably really even want to. I'd love to get on a little bit more. But I'm going to go ahead and finish up with this red, because the yellow is probably at this point more than thoroughly dry, and I'm going to go ahead and hit all that yellow with a wash. Once I am out of the pan on the brush. Less than 50. That's a telling statement. Alright. Swap over to washing brush. Get a little brown. We'll note, not going to put the wash into the wet palette because it'll just get washed out. Let's see. I'm just going to use this thing. Really handy, turns out, for painting pop sockets, because you're able to just pop out the old color and drop a new one in. I'm using Battle Mud Wash for this, which is basically just Agrax Earthshade for those who are used to other washes, also known as something tone from Army Painter. I don't know, I've never really used the Army Painter range that much. Alright. I do use the wet palette just to see how much paint I still have on the brush. But then we're going to go in here and just hit those yellow spaces. Kind of instantly darkens everything up, but more importantly, you can really see the definition on those lines, which is what we're aiming for. Chose brown over black for this purpose, because brown and yellow just pair well together. Comparatively, if you wanted to really like push a comic booky look with some marking and stuff, you could definitely go black instead, but I think the brown, especially trying to transition out of or bring the color back up, that brown is definitely the way to go to make it look more just like a yellow shadow, while also still being dark and adding like purposefully darker lines to the character instead of just hitting it with a yellow wash, which is also something I'm just kind of generally skeptical of. The one thing I will say with any and all washes is if you have any major spots that are looking shiny slash glossy, to just go in there and pull a little bit of that wash off, because otherwise it's going to maintain that kind of glossy look after it's done drying, and it just it doesn't look that great on the finished model. So I'm just going in here, leaving the dark spots in the hatching dark, but just cleaning up any of the kind of edges where the wash is pulled to hopefully prevent some of that. Let's see, so go up here, hit the back. A really good way to do that is just kind of push all of the wash around and then go back and push it out as your brush kind of runs out of the wash that you've already put on it. And here around the face, we just want to make sure we don't get it in the eye sockets to tint our eyes brown. Because Shocker, on the bright side of things, if nothing else, has that nice white eye pop instead of having to go in and paint pupils or anything like that. So yeah, just like that, the yellow parts have been significantly darkened. But on the bright side, the recesses look really nice and dark without hitting too far to like the black pin line shade kind of a thing. Another way you could do this, if you already have it from other modeling kits and stuff, is you could totally probably hit these with a panel liner. These are super nicely sketched out, and let the panel liner run through and clean it up with an enamel thinner or something. I, however, do not have a brown panel liner and didn't want to go through that process. So this just ends up being a little bit easier. The downside, of course, is we did darken pretty much everything, so I will need to go back in and clean up to bring out that brightness instead of directly going into a highlight tone, mid-tone kind of a thing. With that, and because spending another 30 minutes just penning in all this brown will not be as fun for you guys to watch, I'm going to go back in with the ochre base tone, mid-tone, and just begin to pick out all of the little squares, so that if nothing else, we can kind of see if that is a worthwhile effort. So do very similar things for a character like Spider-Man, who has the panel or the lines all across his costume. And this leg is a little bit of a harder one to show what I'm going for, since it's one of the ones where the sprue connects directly over the mesh padding, which is a little unfortunate, but thankfully it's on the back of the base where you're not looking so much quite as frequently. Let's see. But I think if nothing else, the idea of it here is coming across, where we bring this back up. Let's see. So there's the back of the leg. Again, a little bit messy. But when we take it over here, everything's just super dark, to making it so those lines pop out just a little bit more. And it'll also make the other highlights we go back and do not stand out quite as starkly, but in a good way. Also, thankfully, a lot of his padding is going to be in shadow because of his pose. So while I am bringing up a lot of these back to just that original base, won't have to go through all of these for every highlight that we're going for. Another way you could absolutely do this is going through with a dry brush instead, just to bring it back up to the base tone. Especially if you just wait a second and don't start doing the other colors after your initial yellow. Just go in, dry brush it back up to the original level, and go from there. Because even this base tone without the wash was plenty dark, so we don't want to leave too many of his pads just because they're on the underside in that wash. But we'll leave some of them down there. And the other thing this does, because again we only went through the initial coat, or the initial base layer before the wash with only one coat, it shores up any of the places that were kind of just looking weak on color. Anyway. So, small, but nice difference, just compared from, let's see, from the leg to up there. It's a small difference, but I think it helps. So we'll continue with that process, and then I'll probably hit all of this with one layer of the next step up for the highlights, where basically I'm gonna just be going through and picking out these panels a little bit more selectively, and with a smaller brush. Because the midtone is not going to be me just trying to etch in itty bitty little edge highlights on all of these squares. I think I would just go insane at that point. But it will be me picking out more selectively some squares to bring up to the next shade. Oops. And we'll push ourselves just a little bit. So we're going to leave most of the darkness down here as is. But we'll pick out some individual. And then with the face, just torture myself, basically. Because the face details, or the face padding lines, are not nearly as deep. So going back in here at this point also just helps reinforce what the wash did. Because one of the focal points, even though it's a little bit hidden behind his hands, is still going to be the face. And I won't lie, this is absolutely as tedious as it might seem. So if you want to go with the dry brush strategy to just go through and do this step a lot quicker, I am honestly starting to regret not having done that myself. Let's see. Is that even... That's a weird shadow. And there we have a little bit of wash that also ended up not really doing what it was supposed to and overflowed the recess, which is what's going to happen in these kind of darker areas where the lines weren't quite as thick anyway. So that's one thing that going through manually also helps with, I guess. Okay. There's another spot. Or the wash settled just a bit too much. All right. Let's see. We still got a little bit left. So instead of continuing with the red, I just want to see where the yellow takes us. So I'm going to go ahead and work up to the mid-tone. It's going to be the Manticore Ochre. And usually what I've been doing more recently is creating some little steps in between my colors by mixing like a base tone with the mid-tone and then doing pure mid-tone. But I think that's going to be a bit tedious, especially for this yellow that's going to end up being a little bit more just kind of dotted in there. Let's see, can we get you to refocus, camera? There we go. Plus, I don't know if there's going to be enough space on all these little squares that doing that is going to be necessarily beneficial. So, we're just going to go in and we're going to start doing the highlights on some selective squares. We're not necessarily trying to get the entire square when we do this. If we can leave a little bit of base tone behind, all the more power to the attempt. But we also definitely do want to start brightening these up a little bit. Which this is doing pretty nicely. Yeah. So paint goes on quite a bit brighter than it'll actually end up drying to be. So just for instance, that's going to be starting point on the front of this leg. But also, again, I don't really mind a rather significant transition. That's what we're trying to do here. And building it up to a nice golden yellow. Come back to the front. And yeah, that's looking really nice on the front side now. So just continue with this tedious process. And if this was a video, I'd have a really cool transition point where it's like, aha! And here is all of these little dots of yellow done across the model. It'll make you think, oh man, he did that in like 5 minutes. Not the case. And whenever the pattern does kind of get lost, what you can kind of cheat and do is just place some dots of the highlight color, and it'll sell that you're still doing the keeping it true to the pads, even if you're not really sure. But yeah, so I think this kind of ochre golden yellow is definitely the way to go instead of the pure yellow, like we did on Electro last week, because it just feels right for this guy. So we're going to get in here, let's see. Camera isn't really going to let me catch the underside of the legs dotting, so we're just going to forget that for a little bit. Come down here, make sure I have the right amount of paint on the brush, and continue the dotting process. Because we're doing the highlights, it does mean I'm going to need to be extra careful when I go back and finish up the burgundy and its further things, but also just doesn't really seem to make sense to continue on. With just the base coating the burgundy at this point. And I think not going with multiple kind of transitional tones is also 100% the right call here. For one part, this is giving a really nice definition bonus from the wash and recesses that we hit. And also, especially if we are going to come in with the highlight color, not touching any of, or trying to be very selective about where it's being put, there's no way that all of the transitions would have been able to be read that I was hoping to put into it, or is usually makes it worthwhile trying to transition through 5 different shades of the same area. I think the starkness on his padding will be a lot more rewarding to look at. Alright, and we'll hit a few spots here under the arms. But not all of them, because at this point that is definitely in shadow. And so while we still want the pattern to show off down there, it's not as important to necessarily highlight everything. Yeah, it is a slow burn, but I think the reward after going through and doing it all is absolutely going to be worth it. I will also absolutely suggest probably looking at Dallas's video when he streams painting Electro up, if he hasn't already, because I'm sure he will have a very cool glaze technique that makes everything that I'm doing look very inefficient. But that's okay, because Dallas is the Bob Ross of miniature painting. So I can't really be upset with him for just doing awesome stuff when he paints his minis. I will say it's still very important to grab the little like half pads along the edges of all the seams and stuff, because you don't want that in shadow. You want that color to pop in the corners. You probably don't want to hit them with the highlights when you go back through with them, but it's important to still give it that first mid-tone layer pop. So going through and doing all the padding like this is also only confirmation to me that yes, you should absolutely, if you have the tools and ability to do so, you should absolutely put those arms on after the fact, paint them up separately, because going through and hitting all these little chest panels and even his face, to be honest, is going to become significantly more difficult. Why are we being like this, camera? So let's see. I think we've got to a good stopping point on the back. Let's hit this shoulder area one more time. So right here, we don't actually have a pad to highlight, pick out. So just kind of following it to the best of my ability to pick out a few of those. And then as we get over here to the face, the eardrum, we're just going to highlight the top half of it instead of hitting the whole square like we are for a lot of this other stuff. And then we're just going to be extra careful around the face. To hit those highlight pops. Because as easy as it would be to hide the face behind the cool fist shocking action, which is totally what his action figure box would call it. It's important to give that face still the additional definition that it deserves. We'll get a few of these under his chin and probably call it a day. Thank you, EH. Slowly but surely. Let's see, how can we even approach the face? So like back there, we can still get it. The lines aren't as sculpted on as deeply back there, but like you can still kind of make out her pattern. Hitting the face in a few spots is going to be a challenge. All right. So we know he's got his chin, his nose, and yeah, the arms are just straight up in the way at this point. A little too far. So it's easy enough to get to the side panels here. Well, maybe we come in from the top. That's the angle we need. Yeah, he was the boss battle in like the New York subway or something, right, Timmy? Feels right for Shocker anyway. And if you mess up your panel lines, take the damp brush, go in, run the paint out, let that area dry up before you go back to it, because you will absolutely kind of have the opportunity to mess up your lines, and instead of trying to go in and wash in a very, very small area with just a little line and then go in and touch up the wash and everything, it's definitely easier to just take a wet brush, smack the area in question that's giving you trouble, and come back to it a little bit later. Well, as much trouble as the face is giving me, I'm probably going to try to have to tackle most of it off camera. The legs and arms that you can more easily reach. Let's see, come on, focus up. Significant difference between the bottom part and top part. Disappointed that he wasn't a 2. I did wish that Shocker was finally our 2-threat spider foe. I feel like of the spider foes out there, he and Vulture would probably be the ones to have been a 2-threat for the spider foes. unless they do something funky with Spot. But even in, like, if you give him extreme mobility, he's probably going to be a 3-2. So yeah, I kind of wish either he or Vulture had been a 2 threat to give them that option. But alas. What up, Clyde? Yeah, here just to see me wrap up. So what we accomplished today is we base coated the yellow with more of an ochre than an actual yellow, starting with the Gizmo fur, hit it with a brown wash to really let it get into those recesses. Yeah, he should have been a 2. And then went back over it with the base coat to give it a little bit of a better transition point, and also to just really help keep the recesses darkened. And then we hit it with the mid-tone. And for the mid-tone, we maybe try to leave a little bit of the edges of the base coat still, but it's not necessarily like the priority. We're just trying to very neatly dot all of the different pads or scales that Shocker has going on. And then for the highlights, probably break out a smaller brush and try to do some edging, selective edging, because trying to outline all of those panels would be absolutely crazy. I will say, for anybody watching this who has not built your own Shocker yet, keep one or both of the arms off. They'll be super easy to glue back on. I just did not think of how difficult it would be to access his face and chest after the arms were on. That's usually like, oh, the chest is a little bit of a problem, but like it's mostly in shadow. So I'm kind of okay only hitting this top part. I'll go in and dot a few of those, but like the highlights are all going to be kind of on the edge there anyway. I'm not even worrying about what's going on deeper down there. But yeah, that would be my recommendation if you're somebody who does the partial stuff. But that's all I've got for today. I'm going to go grab some lunch. Hope you all have a fantastic